Toxic people exist everywhere. The colleague who constantly interrupts, the family member who belittles your choices, the stranger online who seems to thrive on provocation. Each encounter leaves a sting. You feel your heart race, your chest tighten, your mind demanding justice. How dare they speak to me like that? At first, it seems harmless. A single insult brushed aside, a sarcastic tone ignored, a mocking laugh forgotten after a few minutes. But slowly, these moments accumulate. At work, one dismissive remark ruins your morning. At home, one sarcastic comment lingers long after dinner, souring the air between people who should care for one another. Online, one sneer overshadows 100 words of support. Toxicity spreads, not only through their behavior, but through our reaction to it. The poison multiplies because we carry it within. Anger appears as the instinctive answer. It arrives uninvited but with force. You lash out, you defend, you replay the insult endlessly in your mind. Some confront immediately, spitting out words later regretted. Others retreat, but carry silent bitterness for days, even weeks. Either way, you give your peace to another. You hand them the key to your inner fortress, allowing them to disturb the very space that should remain your own. The problem is not rare, it is universal. Every culture, every age, every profession knows the sting of disrespect. A toxic voice may change language, setting, or form, but the impact is strikingly similar. The battlefield shifts, boardrooms, kitchens, comment sections, but the spark is always the same. A toxic person challenges your pride, and your pride demands a fight. This is why the problem feels inescapable. Wherever people gather, pride is tested and anger rises. The danger lies in how quietly anger enslaves us. We believe we are defending ourselves, but in truth, we are giving power away. The person who insults you once can occupy your thoughts for hours. The careless laugh of a stranger can haunt your day more than the kindness of 10 friends. When you rage at a toxic remark, you do not hurt them. You hurt yourself. You poison your body with stress, your relationships with resentment, and your mind with endless replay. The toxic person does not carry the burden, you do. So here lies the question: if anger enslaves us, how do we face toxic people without losing ourselves? If toxic voices surround us daily, how do we remain steady? What would Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic philosopher who wrote daily reminders to himself, do if he stood in our shoes today, surrounded not by senators and generals, but by colleagues, relatives, and anonymous critics online? He would not waste time wishing the world free of toxic people. He would not plead for them to change before he could find peace. He would remind himself that insult belongs to the speaker, not the listener. He would note that anger is not strength but surrender. And he would insist that dignity rests in character, not in reputation. This is the shift Stoicism demands: to stop letting others dictate your state of mind. The toxic person may speak, but you decide whether their words take root. They may sneer, but you decide whether that sneer defines your day. The insult may land, but it cannot stay unless you invite it in. And so the path becomes clear. It is not the path of retaliation, which multiplies conflict. It is not the path of silent bitterness, which corrodes within. It is the path of clarity, to pause, to reframe, to stand firm in virtue while the noise passes. This is the path Marcus Aurelius walked, and it is the path we now take. To face toxic people without anger is not easy, but it is possible, and in that possibility lies freedom. Why do toxic people ignite such fire within us? The answer begins with identity. Most of us tie our self-worth to how others perceive us. Respect feels like proof that we matter. Disrespect feels like evidence that we do not. What should be nothing more than air leaving another person's mouth becomes, in our minds, a verdict on our value. 3 roots fuel this fire. First, ego attachment. We depend on external validation to confirm our importance. Compliments feel like nourishment. Criticism feels like starvation. When others ignore, belittle, or mock us, we read it as denial of our existence. Ego magnifies a passing insult into a crisis of dignity. A sarcastic laugh, which should be dismissed as irrelevant, suddenly feels like proof we are unworthy. Second, fear of social standing. We are social creatures, wired to belong. From childhood, we learned that acceptance means safety and rejection means danger. Disrespect feels like a small exile. A colleague's mockery can feel like being pushed out of the circle. A family member's contempt can feel like betrayal. This fear intensifies anger because we confuse a bruise to status with a threat to survival. Third, the illusion of control. We imagine we can shape how others view us through achievement, kindness, or fairness. We build a careful image and expect it to hold. When toxic people still choose contempt, the illusion shatters. Helplessness follows, and anger rises as a desperate attempt to restore control. Yet anger cannot govern another mind. It does not change their judgment. It only tightens our dependence on it. Modern life sharpens all three roots. On social media, validation and rejection are measured in real time. A single hostile comment can overshadow 100 notes of support. At work, hierarchies make status visible and fragile. One dismissive manager can outweigh a room full of respect. At home, expectations are highest. We hope for steady gratitude and receive silence. The closer the relationship, the deeper the sting. In each arena, pride looks outward for peace and finds variables it can never steady. The lesson is blunt. The sting of disrespect does not come from the act itself, but from our interpretation. Words carry no inherent weight. We attach weight by agreeing to their authority, yet most of us confuse another's judgment with a final verdict on our worth. In doing so, we hand over custody of the mind to strangers, colleagues, and loved ones. We let passing moods set the climate inside our chest. This is the soil in which anger grows. The toxic person supplies the spark. Our ego, fear, and illusion of control supply the fuel. Remove the fuel and the spark dies. But restraint alone is not enough. White-knuckled silence keeps the mind chained to the insult. We need a framework that relocates our center of gravity from reputation to character, from outcomes to effort, from approval to principle. Stoicism supplies that framework. It begins with a divide. What is up to us and what is not. Another's words, judgments, and moods are not. Our judgments, choices, and actions are. When this line is drawn, the terrain changes. An insult becomes data about the speaker, not a measure of the self. Status wobbles lose their terror because dignity rests in conduct, not applause. The urge to control perception loosens because we commit to controlling only what reason places within reach. Understanding these roots does not make disrespect pleasant. It makes it manageable. It gives us a map for the next encounter. Notice the ego grasping for praise, the status alarm, the urge to seize control, and decline to obey them. In that refusal, heat cools into clarity. Then the question becomes practical and precise. Given what is in my control right now, what is the right action? That question points forward. It is the doorway from analysis to practice, from diagnosis to discipline, and it frames the next step. How would Marcus Aurelius, facing the same provocations we face, apply this divide in the routines of modern life? The answer is not abstract. It is lived moment by moment, breath by breath. Whenever we choose composure over pride, duty over ego, and principle over the shifting weather of approval everywhere. So how would Marcus Aurelius confront toxic people in modern life? Not in ancient Rome, but in our world of offices, families, and online platforms. The context has changed, but the human heart has not. The provocations are the same. Interruptions, dismissals, insults, and contempt. The challenge remains how to respond without surrendering peace. At work, if interrupted or mocked, he would pause. The pause is the first line of defense. Anger thrives on speed, and speed is its weapon. A single breath breaks the chain of impulse. That breath creates a gap between the event and the response, and in that gap lies freedom. He would continue calmly, showing that his dignity is not dependent on volume or dominance. He would demonstrate that authority rests not in shouting louder, but in refusing to be shaken. Over time, that composure earns more respect than retaliation ever could. A manager may not remember who spoke the loudest in a meeting, but they will remember the one who stayed steady under pressure. At home, if dismissed or belittled, he would remind himself, "I did this because it was right, not because I expected praise." Toxic words from family cut deeply, precisely because we expect loyalty and gratitude. That expectation binds us, and disappointment feeds anger. Marcus would free himself from this trap by acting from principle, not expectation. The deed remains good even if ignored. A parent who cooks a meal, a spouse who carries responsibility, a child who contributes. All of these are worthy in themselves, not because applause follows. By detaching from the hunger for recognition, resentment dissolves. Peace replaces bitterness because the act was its own reward. Online, where insults multiply without limit, Marcus would see them for what they are, the echo of another's pain or ignorance. He would remind himself that words typed in haste say more about the state of the speaker than about the worth of the target. He would not dive into the mud of endless argument, for he knew that quarreling with shadows does not dignify but depletes. Sometimes the strongest reply is none at all. Silence itself can be a form of mastery. To refuse engagement is not weakness, it is the refusal to let another dictate the terms of your attention. By withholding reaction, he would remain free. In public life, Marcus would not chase reputation. He would know that reputation rests on what others think, and that cannot be controlled. What can be controlled is conduct, honesty, patience, fairness, and restraint. He would focus on embodying these qualities, regardless of whether the crowd mocked or praised. For him, a toxic critic provides no more authority than a passing stranger. The standard is inner consistency, not external approval. In each setting, the pattern is clear. Marcus would not fight for ego but act for virtue. He would ask, "What is the right action now?" Not, "How can I restore my pride?" Duty replaces pride, and calm replaces anger. The toxic person still speaks, but their power ends where your interpretation begins. The brilliance of this approach lies in its universality. It applies whether the insult comes from a superior at work, a spouse at home, or a faceless critic online. It requires no special conditions, no perfect environment. It asks only that you reclaim what is always yours: your judgment, your conduct, your choice. This is not easy. The impulse to defend pride is strong, but Marcus would remind us that impulse is not destiny. A pause, a breath, a reminder of principle, these are small acts that redirect the course of anger. And each time you choose them, you train the mind to meet insult with steadiness. What begins as effort becomes habit. What begins as discipline becomes character. Modern life confronts us with more toxic voices than ever before. Social media alone ensures that criticism arrives daily, often from strangers who know nothing about us. Workplaces reward aggression, and families crack under stress. Yet Marcus's way shows that peace does not depend on changing the world. It depends on changing how we meet the world. To remain calm in a storm of disrespect is not retreat, it is mastery. So the answer to how Marcus Aurelius would confront toxic people in modern life is simple but not shallow. He would pause. He would reframe. He would act from duty, not from ego. He would remember that character outweighs reputation, that silence can be stronger than words, and that anger is a chain rather than a weapon. In doing so, he would not merely survive toxic voices, he would transform them into opportunities to practice freedom. The philosophy Marcus lived by, Stoicism, offers principles that dismantle the hold of toxic people. They speak, they mock, they belittle, but Stoicism strips their words of authority. What remains is your choice. Each principle is not abstract, but a tool, sharpened for daily use. Principle 1. Control and acceptance. Focus only on what lies within your power. Another person's words, gestures, or judgments are beyond you. Your response, however, belongs entirely to you. To waste life raging at the uncontrollable is folly. Marcus wrote often that external events are indifferent. Only our judgments matter. When insult arrives, you cannot silence the speaker, but you can silence the reaction that poisons your peace. Control begins with a pause, and acceptance grows from recognizing that some things will never be under your command. Principle 2. Character over reputation. Character is what you are. Reputation is what others believe. The two often diverge. A toxic person may damage reputation, spreading lies or ridicule, but they cannot touch character unless you let anger corrode it. Reputation belongs to the shifting crowd. Character belongs to steady reason. Marcus would remind himself that to act with justice, patience, and honesty is enough. What people say afterward is beyond your reach. If you protect your virtue, you remain whole, even when slandered. Principle 3. Reframing disrespect. Insults reveal the weakness of the speaker, not the worth of the target. A mocking tone, a dismissive gesture, or a cutting remark says more about the state of their soul than about yours. Disrespect is their failure, not yours. To see it this way is to rob anger of its fuel. Marcus advised himself to imagine the offender clearly, a human being acting in ignorance, perhaps driven by pain, envy, or confusion. If so, why give their insult the weight of truth? By reframing, you reduce it to noise. Principle 4. Universal kinship. Even toxic people are fellow humans, stumbling under ignorance or pain. Marcus often reminded himself that all people are part of one community. To rage against them is to rage against nature itself. This does not mean approving their behavior, but understanding its source. A child lashes out when afraid. An adult mocks when insecure. Compassion, not rage, is the wiser response. To see them as kin is to recognize that you too have failed in similar ways. Anger dissolves when you remember that you and the offender are both flawed travelers on the same road. Principle 5. Obstacles as training. Every insult is a chance to practice patience and composure. A toxic voice is not only a threat, but also material for discipline. To endure without anger is to strengthen the fortress of the soul. Marcus viewed adversity as exercise. Without challenge, virtue weakens. When someone provokes you, they hand you an opportunity. You can practice restraint. You can prove to yourself that calm is possible. What looks like an obstacle is actually a teacher, sharpening your ability to remain steady under pressure. Together, these principles create a shield. They do not erase the sting of words, but they prevent those words from dictating your peace. The toxic person still speaks, but their power fades. Their insult remains sound in the air unless you choose to make it meaning in the mind. Stoicism shifts the balance. You stop asking, "Why do they treat me this way?" and begin asking, "How should I act now, given what is within my control?" This shield is not theoretical, it is lived through habit. Each day you encounter small insults, an interruption, a dismissive glance, an online sneer. Each is a chance to apply the 5 principles. Pause, remember control, value character, reframe, recall kinship, and train yourself through the challenge. Over time, the pattern becomes natural. Anger no longer erupts at every provocation. The fortress of composure holds. Stoicism does not deny that words can sting. It does not pretend that toxic behavior is pleasant, but it insists that pain becomes slavery only when we surrender our judgment. The insult may arrive, but it cannot stay unless we invite it in. Marcus Aurelius lived by this truth, and it remains available to us. The principles are simple. The practice is hard, yet the reward is freedom. The kind of freedom no toxic voice can steal. How do we live this philosophy? The principles of Stoicism are only as strong as their practice. Reading about calm is easy. Speaking of composure is simple, but the real test arrives in the ordinary moments, when pride is stung, when toxic voices press for a reaction. It is here, in the small events of daily life, that Stoicism either takes root or fades into theory. At work, the test comes quickly. A colleague interrupts before you finish a sentence. Another takes credit for your idea. The instinct is to fight back, to raise your voice, to demand recognition. But Marcus would remind us, dignity is not secured in noise. When interrupted, pause. Let the silence stretch. Then continue calmly. Do not compete for dominance. True authority rests on steadiness, not aggression. Over time, people notice who speaks with control. Authority built on shouting fades once the voice is gone. Authority built on composure endures because it signals mastery of self. At home, the challenge cuts deeper. Family members may overlook your effort, fail to say thank you, or dismiss your contribution as trivial. Because we expect loyalty from those closest to us, their words wound more than a stranger's insult. Yet here too, Stoicism offers clarity. When overlooked, remind yourself, I did this because it was right. Detach from the need for gratitude. If the action is good, it remains good even if unrecognized. To act for principle is to free yourself from resentment. In this way, you protect peace at the very place where anger usually grows fastest. Online, insults are everywhere. Strangers with no knowledge of your life speak as though they know your soul. The urge is to strike back, to defend, to argue endlessly. But this is a trap. Each reply feeds the cycle, and the cycle consumes your time and energy. The Stoic answer is different. Step back. See the insult as the echo of the other person's struggle. Perhaps it is envy, perhaps pain. Either way, it is not yours to carry. Sometimes the strongest response is silence. Sometimes a short, measured reply is enough. Either protects your dignity more than rage ever could. Daily exercises strengthen this practice. Without deliberate training, habits of anger return. Marcus wrote to himself each morning to prepare his mind. We can do the same. Journaling at night becomes a mirror for the soul. Record moments of disrespect. Ask yourself, how did I respond? Did I meet insult with steadiness or with irritation? What could I have done differently? Reflection transforms mistakes into teachers. Breathing techniques provide a shield in the moment. When anger rises, pause for a single breath. This breath creates distance between insult and reaction. In that distance, you regain choice. Without it, anger decides for you. With it, reason has time to intervene. Morning reflection sets the tone for the day. Rehearse Stoic maxims such as, "It is not what they do that harms me, but how I interpret it." These words are not decoration, they are reminders. By repeating them, you train the mind to recall them when provoked. When the insult comes, the maxim rises, and the reaction changes. Over time, this training reshapes the mind. Disrespect loses its grip. Toxic people still speak, but their voices carry less weight. The interruption at work no longer ruins your morning. The lack of gratitude at home no longer breeds bitterness. The online insult no longer unsettles your peace. Each act of restraint strengthens the inner fortress. Living this philosophy does not mean ignoring every offense or pretending that insults do not sting. It means recognizing that their sting lasts only as long as you grant it power. By practicing calm in the small moments, you prepare for the larger storms. And when those storms arrive, you discover that your peace no longer depends on others, it depends on your own discipline. In this way, Stoicism moves from theory to habit, from words on a page to strength in a life. And when that shift happens, toxic people no longer dictate your peace. You carry it within, steady, untouchable. Modern life multiplies opportunities for disrespect. The arenas are endless, and each one sharpens the challenge. On social media, outrage is the currency. A careless comment spreads faster than reasoned words. An insult often gains more attention than truth. In workplaces, aggression is rewarded. Those who interrupt, dominate meetings, and belittle colleagues often climb faster than those who remain measured. Within families, stress breaks patience. Words are spoken in anger, loyalty is tested, and the very people who should protect one another sometimes wound most deeply. In such an environment, anger has become a reflex. We tell ourselves that to be angry is to be strong, that to strike back is to defend dignity. Yet anger corrodes everything it touches. It burns relationships, damages health, and blinds judgment. What begins as self-defense becomes self-destruction. The toxic person throws a spark, but our anger supplies the fuel. Without our consent, the fire cannot spread. Stoicism restores clarity. It reminds us that dignity is self-sustained, not borrowed from the approval of others. No insult, however sharp, can strip away integrity unless we surrender it. Anger pretends to be a weapon, but Stoicism unmasks it as slavery. It binds us to the very person we wish to resist, giving them power over our inner state. Marcus Aurelius insisted that freedom lies not in controlling others, but in mastering ourselves. To remain steady under insult is not weakness, but independence. Stoicism trains us to meet insult with steadiness and to preserve peace, even in the storm of disrespect. When toxic words arrive, the question is not how can I silence them, but how can I remain in control of myself? That shift changes everything. The battle moves from their voice to our interpretation. Once we see this, anger loses its disguise. It is not a shield, it is a chain. And chains can be broken. In a culture obsessed with reaction, Stoicism calls for reflection. Reaction is quick, loud, and shallow. Reflection is slow, quiet, and strong. Reaction seeks victory in the moment. Reflection seeks mastery for life. Modern society praises the quick reply, the sharp comeback, the public confrontation. But Marcus would ask, what is gained if you win the exchange but lose your peace? Reflection protects what matters most. It gives space for reason to intervene before impulse acts. In a world of fragile egos, Stoicism builds unshakable character. Fragility comes from depending on reputation. If our worth depends on applause, every insult is fatal. If it rests on character, no insult can touch it. Stoicism shifts the foundation from shifting opinion to steady principle. The crowd may praise or condemn, but your integrity remains your own. That is why Stoic calm is not indifferent. It is confidence rooted in what cannot be taken away. Amid constant toxicity, Stoicism offers the rare gift of calm. Calm does not mean silence at all costs, nor denial of injustice. It means responding from reason, not rage. It means refusing to let another's mood govern your state of mind. Calm allows you to continue your work, care for your family, and engage with the world without being hijacked by every insult. It is a strength so rare in our age that when it appears, it commands attention. This is why Stoicism fits modern life. The noise of outrage grows louder each year. The pressure to react intensifies, yet the principle remains timeless. What is outside your control is not yours to command. What is within your control is always enough. To remember this is to walk free. Modern life will not change its nature. Insults will not disappear. Toxicity will not vanish. But we can change how we meet them. We can pause instead of react, reflect instead of rage, and anchor dignity in character rather than in reputation. In this way, Stoicism does not escape the world. It arms us to live within it. So, what would Marcus Aurelius do when facing toxic people? He would pause. He would reframe. He would focus on duty, not pride. He would remember that character outweighs reputation and that anger is a chain, not a weapon. His response would not be fueled by the desire to win a moment, but by the determination to preserve what cannot be taken away: his integrity. The pause matters. Anger thrives on speed. It wants you to strike before reason can intervene. Marcus would take a breath. That small delay is not weakness, but strength. In the space of a breath, clarity enters. What felt like an attack a moment ago is seen for what it is: noise. The toxic person expects you to flare, to mirror their aggression. Refusing to do so denies them victory. Reframing matters just as much. Insults are rarely about truth. They are about the state of the one who speaks. Mockery reveals insecurity. Contempt reveals ignorance. Marcus would remind himself, if it is true, let me correct myself. If it is false, it is nothing. Reframing turns poison into training. Instead of being crushed by insult, you use it as a chance to grow in patience and composure. Focusing on duty shifts the center. Pride asks, how could they treat me this way? Duty asks, what is the right thing to do now? Duty grounds you in principle rather than emotion. At work, this might mean continuing your task with dignity. At home, it might mean responding with patience rather than resentment. Online, it might mean silence rather than endless argument. Duty does not ask for recognition, it asks only that you act justly. Marcus would also remind himself that character always outweighs reputation. Reputation is fragile, shaped by rumors, opinions, and misunderstandings. Character is firm, built on choices. A toxic person may slander you, but they cannot stain your integrity unless you let anger corrode it. Your worth rests not in what others say, but in how you live. This truth frees you from the tyranny of every insult. And above all, Marcus would remember that anger is not a weapon but a chain. To respond in rage is to give control to the offender. You become their prisoner, bound by their words. Stoicism breaks that chain by showing that freedom lies in choosing your response. Serenity, not fury, is the mark of strength. For us, the lesson is clear. Disrespect is inevitable, but suffering from it is optional. Every insult is a choice point. Will we hand over our peace, or will we keep it? Will we let another's careless words dictate the climate of our mind, or will we guard that climate as our own? Stoicism gives us the tools to keep our peace, to protect dignity, and to live free from the tyranny of toxic voices. This does not mean becoming passive. It does not mean accepting injustice in silence. It means responding with reason instead of rage. You may set boundaries firmly, you may confront wrongs clearly, but you do so without surrendering calm. That is the difference between reaction and discipline. Reaction serves ego. Discipline serves principle. The true victory is not silence for its own sake, nor retaliation disguised as strength. The true victory is serenity, the ability to walk away unshaken, to remain steady while others stumble. Serenity is not escape, it is mastery. It is the capacity to continue your life's work without being dragged into every petty quarrel. It is the quiet confidence that no insult can touch what is rooted in virtue. Marcus practiced this strength daily, writing reminders to himself in his meditations. He knew how easy it was to fall into anger and how costly it became when left unchecked. His discipline was not about suppressing emotion, but about training judgment, and that discipline remains just as necessary for us today. In a world filled with toxic voices, online, at work, even at home, the rare ability to remain calm is revolutionary. To meet insult without rage, to face disrespect without collapse, to carry dignity untouched by the noise around you. This is mastery. This is the strength our world needs most today.